Welcome everyone to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. It is a great pleasure to be joined today by the founder and chairman of IDSF, Brigadier General Amir Avivi. General Avivi, thank you so much for joining today.
My pleasure.
General, it's been a little bit of time since you last joined us on this briefing, and there's, of course, a lot happening in this war. Really at the top of the list, people want to understand what is the progress in Gaza. People want to understand, will there be a joint attack on Iran? What can you share with us?
Yeah, I would like to start with Iran and with the declaration of President Trump that they are getting closer to a deal. And, you know, Moshe, this brought me back many years ago. At the time was when I was a brigade commander on the Egyptian border. And a month after Obama was first elected, I had a visit of a donor with his family. He came with a chopper to my unit. I landed, never met me before. He goes into my office, he sees me, and he's all excited, and he says to me, "Colonel, what do you think about President Obama?" And I looked at him and I said, you know, I studied American history for my bachelor's degree. And I studied about presidents that lived 100 years ago, and they're still debating whether they were good or bad. What do you want me to say about somebody who was elected a month ago? But I said this, I'm willing to say one thing about Obama at the time. Looking at the Iranian threat, Obama had two choices, be a Churchill or a Chamberlain. And I think that President Trump is exactly in the same junction. He needs to choose how he will be remembered in history. Is he going to be a Churchill or a Chamberlain? Now, I want to emphasize, Israel is not against deals. If the deal is like a Libyan deal where the US goes in to all the nuclear sites and dismantle completely the sites, and there is no capability of Iran anymore to enrich uranium, and everything is under control and dismantled. Great achievement, historical achievement. But this is the Iranians we are dealing with. And with jihadists, you cannot cut deals. There is no great deals with jihadists. And I'm hoping that there will be a moment where President Trump will realize that he's dealing with a vicious, terrible entity, and if they're not going to really enable the US to dismantle all the sites, there will be a need for a decisive attack on these nuclear sites and other capabilities of Iran. And I'm really hoping that we won't find ourselves in a reality where the US backs off, the Iranians get what they want, and then Israel will be left alone to deal with this threat. And if we need to, and I think that yesterday at the JNS conference, Prime Minister Netanyahu made it crystal clear, Israel is not going to enable Iran to become nuclear, even if we have to attack them alone. Is this the best option? I don't think so. I think we should do it together. I think the US should lead that. But we'll see how this develops. And I'm sure that the government is conveying all the relevant messages to the administration, to President Trump, monitoring what the Iranians are doing. And we'll have to follow this in the coming weeks and see where this is going.
You know, when looking at the Trump administration's negotiations right now, their interest in making a deal, what do you think they believe has changed? Meaning, why do you think they have the capacity, or they think they have the capacity to strike a deal in a meaningful way, which does not fall back on the disastrous JCPOA? Has something changed with Iran? Is the Trump administration that fundamentally different, that they have the capacity to come to a better deal?
Well, Israel has said from day one, decades ago, there is only one way to negotiate with the Iranians, and this is having a credible military threat and the willingness to use it. Credibility means you are willing to fight. You have the means and you have the motivation. And I think that we're in a very different moment where the administration has amassed a huge force. Israel is ready. the Iranians have lost all their proxies. They are alone. They are without air defense. Very vulnerable. It's a completely different scenario, and I think that President Trump is assessing that in this reality, they might cede. They might actually agree to dismantling their nuclear sites. I think that the chance that this will happen is not very high. I will be surprised, and it will be a very nice surprise to see that they're actually willing to do that. But I would recommend being very cautious. Iranians are masters of deceive. And I think that during the negotiations, there will be a moment when President Trump will realize who he is dealing with and what needs to be done to get this over with.
Is there any concern that the Iranians will agree to something now in the hopes of just kicking the ball down the road and waiting for a new administration, waiting for some type of change in DC, and that they'll agree to terms, but that they're somewhat meaningless and they won't necessarily hold their part of the bargain?
The Iranians invented chess. They're good chess players. They look decades ahead. They have their strategic goals. They know that democratic administrations are not forever, and that in 4 years there will be a new one. So they are looking at how to preserve their ability to govern, and if they need to do tactical retreats, they will do that, but they won't give their ultimate goal. This is world domination. This is taking over the Middle East. This is controlling really the region. The only thing that can change this is bringing down this entity, the government itself. And this is not something that I see that the US is motivated to do. We need a change of regime. We need Iran to go back to being a country that is willing to engage with the Western world, that is more inclined to the West and not so radical religious. And we'll see how things develop.
General Avivi, thank you for that update. In Israel, everyone is just kind of playing this waiting game, trying to understand when and how things will progress. Do you see any scenario where this war can end without an attack, without a deal with Iran? Meaning, as long as Iran remains a threat, whatever happens in Gaza, whatever happens in the north, the war just can't end.
No, it can't. This is the head of the snake, and we need to cut this head one way or another. It's either them surrendering and giving up their capabilities, or we have to fight and destroy this capabilities. It's one way or another. And we cannot end the war without making sure that Iran cannot be a nuclear power. And I think in Israel, there is a clear understanding, not only in the government, also in the opposition, or most of it. So we'll see how this develops in the coming weeks and where these negotiations are going.
That being the case, there's, of course, a stated goal of the war to destroy Hamas as a governmental and military entity in Gaza. How close are we to achieving that?
Well, I think that the timetable is dependent on the question whether there will be a hostage deal or not. I mean, if there is a hostage deal at a certain point, this deal might be a month or two, maybe more, and then it will prolong the time until the IDF will go on a full-scale attack. If the Hamas insists on not releasing hostages, there will be a moment that the cabinet will have to take a decision to call a big amount of reservists, of divisions, and go in and destroy Hamas. And even when we'll do that, Israel will take in account that there are hostages still, and we'll probably see a reality of Israel conquering most of Gaza, surrounding Hamas with the hostages in a certain small area in Gaza, and then negotiating on our terms the release of the hostages in a reality where Hamas completely already lost all the territory almost and was destroyed. So in any case, we'll bring the hostages back. We'll do whatever is needed to bring them back. I think one big game changer that we might see in the coming weeks, we understand that since we haven't enabled any humanitarian aid in the last few months, there will be a moment where aid will have to go into Gaza. We cannot starve everyone there. And the idea is to direct the Gazans to an area controlled by the IDF, create a kind of humanitarian bubble zone, and supply the Gazans with humanitarian aid in an area that is not controlled by Hamas, and deprive Hamas from this aid. Hamas is already not paying salaries in the last few weeks. If they cannot pay salaries and they cannot provide food for their terrorists, this by itself can bring a collapse to Hamas or assist dramatically in the efforts of war. So I think that in the coming weeks, months, we'll see also a big change in the way we conduct the humanitarian aid in a way that can be very impactful, and also maybe bring Hamas to the table and agreeing to a hostage deal to get some relief, talking about humanitarian aid.
Now, are we seeing any movement of the Gazan population, the civilians, out of Gaza since the beginning of this war or in these last few months? Meaning you're saying that Hamas and the civilians are still very much intertwined, but has there been any movement of the Gazan people away from not only these war zones, but outside of the Gaza Strip?
There is all the time a certain amount of flow of Gazans outside the Gaza Strip. And I think the last few months, something like 30,000 Gazans left, even more. There is continuous talk with different countries about accepting them. The motivation in Gaza to emigrate is very high, but they need somewhere to go to. They need visas. They need their countries to permit them to come. And every time a country says they're willing to receive a certain amount of Gazans, Israel facilitates that, and it happens. It's happening as we speak. It's not the amount of people we're talking about, the big masses yet. And I think that talking about the big masses, this will be relevant when Israel destroys Hamas and takes over the Gaza Strip. Then it will become a major effort in Israel and also in the administration to really facilitate that.
And what does that look like? What is the process that the IDF randomly or selects somehow Gazans who are eligible to exit and transports them into Israel and puts them on a flight? What is the system like right now?
So Israel has direct contacts through COGAT to all the heads of the families in the Gaza Strip. They all talk with the head of COGAT. When we convey and say, okay, there is this amount of visas for this and these people, whether it's women, sick people, kids, they organize the people, they bring them to the area of Kerem Shalom, it's the crossing in the south connecting Gaza and Israel. They are taken by buses to the Ramon airport, and then they fly from there, or they are taken by buses to the crossing with Jordan, and they pass into Jordan and they fly from Jordan. At the moment, it's more difficult to do it through the crossing of Rafah. The Egyptians are making a lot of problems. But overall, Israel has the ability to relocate as many Gazans as are willing to relocate and have where to go. It's not a logistical problem. The logistics is not what's going to stop this process.
Now, when the Trump plan came out about relocating Gazans out of Gaza to other countries, people in the world went crazy. You know, how dare you relocate people against their will, take them out of their land? But what you're saying is that it's currently happening on a smaller scale. Is there any feedback about the Gazans who are exiting? Are they upset? They're begrudging the fact that they're being taken away? Or are they vying for the opportunity to be one of those individuals that get transported out? Do we have any data on that?
I think that the problem is exactly the opposite. It's not that we or the Americans are relocating people against their will. It's the other way around. They have a will, and they are being locked in Gaza in a war zone, and they don't want to be there. Just like millions of Ukrainians left Ukraine in the war, and I think the war in Gaza is, in a way, much more devastating than the war in Ukraine. And the Gazans, many of them want to leave, and the Egyptians block them. They block the border. They are not letting them go, and this is inhuman. So if 50-60% of the Gazans want to leave, you have to facilitate that. And the countries need to open their doors for people who don't want to be in a war zone. They don't want to be under a terror organization. They don't want to be under Hamas. So I think that's the human thing to do, and not the other way. Nobody is going to be relocated if they don't want to be relocated. It's all voluntary, and people are motivated to relocate.
Now, General, in the headlines right now, we have once again the International Court of Justice is holding hearings about the ethics of the way Israel conducts this war, and now the extent to which Israel is obligated to provide humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza. As a man who has fought wars, led wars, and is quite aware of the ethics and morality of war, what is your response to this claim that Israel is required to provide this aid to Gaza?
So there are certain things that are going on in the court. One is Israel's appeal, and Israel said, and rightly so, we're not part of this court. We never joined the court, so you cannot process us. The court cannot process countries who are not members. And the other claim is you are representing supposedly a non-existent state called Palestine, which doesn't exist. They are not an existent entity. They are not a state, so they are not someone that can appeal to the court. And I think that now that the U.S. is putting a lot of pressure and even sanctions on people in this court, they are starting to shift and really change the way they're arguing things. And we might see a moment where they say, yes, you know what, the whole process was wrong. You are not part of the court. We cannot process you. Palestinians are not a state. And maybe we'll see a change. As for humanitarian aid, I would say this. In war, putting a siege is according to international law. It has been done for thousands of years. But when somebody gets out and says, okay, I'm not fighting, I want to get food, you have to give them food. So when we say to the Gazans, move into areas controlled by the IDF and we'll provide you food, but lay down your weapons and don't fight anymore. And this is definitely the right way to do it. And this is exactly what Israel is going to do. They are going to enable the Gazans to move to areas controlled by the IDF and get humanitarian aid. IDF has or Israel have no obligation to give our enemies humanitarian aid, namely Hamas. On Hamas, we can put a siege. And this is what Israel intends to do.
Now, there are claims, and this will be our final question. I know you have a jam-packed day today. There are claims that earlier on in the war, there was an opportunity to foster a relationship with Saudi Arabia and come to a normalization with Saudi Arabia. If only Israel would accommodate the Gazan civilians in Gaza. Israel failed to do that, and therefore normalization with Saudis is out of the question. How do you respond to that?
I don't think this is the case. I think that the normalization with Saudi Arabia was more dependent on the willingness of the U.S. to stand strong against a common enemy, against Iran. We didn't see that in the Biden administration, so the Saudis were not motivated to give this present to the U.S. Normalization for nothing. They want normalization for relieving them from this threat of Iran, for a military alliance that will defend them and secure them from Iran and from the Sunni radicals. And now that the administration is moving towards really taking care of these threats, the Saudis will obviously be much more motivated to have an agreement that will bring prosperity to their economy, that will secure them. I don't think they're going to insist on a Palestinian state. They might want some general declaration. Hamas is a huge enemy of Saudi Arabia. It's Muslim Brotherhood. It's what endangers them more than the Iranians. So they are pushing Israel to destroy Hamas, and Israel needs to destroy Hamas. When we will destroy Hamas, the motivation of the Saudis to do an agreement will be much higher. If we attack Iran, the motivation will be much higher. So winning the war decisively is the key to regional and global peace agreements.
Brigadier General Amir Avivi, thank you so much for sharing all of this, and thank you, of course, for all of your leadership throughout this war.
Thank you very much, Moshe.
Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. If you learned something today, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel to allow us to share the truth with more and more people. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.